Hi, I'm Tamara Leigh, the editor of Blaque magazine, and it is LGBTQ History Month. So all month long, our writers and contributors have been bringing you Reckless recommendations of things for you to check out to make sure that you know your facts and your history. They can't tell you who you are if you know who you are. My job this time is to do documentaries. If you know me, you know I am a documentary girl. So I try to make sure that I stay up on all the LGBTQ documentaries that come out, especially the ones that directly talk about our community. So here is my list. One, Disclosure was dope, came out in 2020 and really ran through historical context of transness in film and media, what the depictions look like, what that has meant to the community in good ways and in bad ways. A lot of celebrities are featured in interviews, but also just a lot of really interesting facts that you may not have seen elsewhere. So definitely want to check out. Paris is Burning, of course, so iconic. It's important for two reasons. One, because it really was the first time the world got to see what ballroom really was. And even though ballroom is international at this point, outside of New York City, I don't think that people necessarily really understand the history and the importance to the scene, to culture, to the community of ballroom. So Paris is Burning gives you a Paris is Burning is also really important because of what happened with and because of the movie. The people that were featured ended up in poverty, ended up murdered, ended up not benefiting from the film. And for it to have had so much international acclaim and attention, that's not how that should have happened. So it's also important in that way to understand how the community is often taken advantage of and people get rich off of our stories. So that's important too. I'm Your Venus actually came out very recently, and Venus from Extravaganza from Paris is Burning is featured. Her story is featured in this film. It follows her brothers as they dig back to try to uncover what happened to her, to learn more about her murder and her death. Features from folks from the House of Extravaganza now and community. But it's a really interesting story, and I felt like it was very, very well done. I felt like it was honest to community and really told her story in a beautiful way, and also some very interesting family dynamics there that played out in a way that I don't think glossed over the hurt that lived there, but also left room for healing that I think that a lot of people from our community can benefit in seeing. Plus, love to Venus is always important, so that is one you don't want to miss. Of course, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha was one of the mothers of the movement, and she and Sylvia saved so many lives in the city. Their work is the reason why we all have the lives and the rights that we have that we're fighting for right now. Any time to honor both of their legacies and their stories is important. It's a dig into who she was and the legacy she left. Super important one. Make sure you have watched that one. The Aggressives is interesting. They actually did a follow-up recently that I also watched, but it is a trip into the lives of some masculine presenting young women. And then the follow-up was equally as interesting. It's mostly interesting because it's just a story you don't see told very often. Trans masculine men's stories often get lost. Masculine presenting lesbian stories often get lost. It's interesting dynamic between the community and what being masculine presenting looks like, just like it's an interesting commentary on what happens with femininity in the community. So it's an important one. Make sure you watch that one. Okay, so 2. We Were Here and How to Survive a Plague. Those both center the HIV AIDS epidemic, what it looked like in San Francisco, what it looked in New York City, which really were the hubs of queer life at that point, and how the community came together, the activism involved. I grouped them together because they are important historical watches, especially since we have been somewhat removed as a community from how incredibly impactful the AIDS epidemic was to community. I think with all of the treatments and advances that we have seen, a whole generation of our community don't fully understand what happened in the 80s and how it decimated communities. And what's most interesting to me, and the reason why I put these two together, is because I was a part of a project a few years back and had to watch a zillion of these documentaries to be able to do some exhibits and some commentary. And the lack of Black LGBTQ representation in any of these documentaries or films about the epidemic that you have seen made is startling, because like with just about every epidemic that the world faces, the Black and brown community, marginalized communities, extra marginalized communities like Black and trans, Black and queer communities always are affected more. But that juxtaposed to the amount of representation in the documentaries and movies about them is wild. In addition to, when you do see Black folks mentioned, it's usually in a very derogatory way. So important to culture to understand the history and the things that happened. Important to history to notice when you're watching these documentaries who you see, whose stories you see, and who you don't. The Dads is actually a short film that came out either this year or last year, and it's really interesting. It is following a very, very short period of time with the fathers of some trans and non-binary folks and their journey to acceptance and understanding of their children. I want to say that Matthew Shepard, who was the young man that was murdered years and years and years ago, brought national attention to the violence against the LGBTQ community. His father is sort of leading or narrating the group. It's short. It's a real short film. I believe that it's either available on like Hulu, Netflix, like the major streamers. But I think it's an important watch, and it's interesting to see their journey with their children. I think especially for other parents who are on that journey, but also for kids who haven't necessarily gotten to that place with their parents, I think it's important to be able to peek into that thought process also. So that's a good watch. Kokomo City, I would highly recommend. It's a really interesting documentary about a group of Black trans women, their experiences with sex work and their just experience through life, period. It is incredibly poignant because one of the stars of that film was actually murdered very shortly after the documentary released. This documentary did Sundance. It did all of the major documentary and movie film circuits and was highly acclaimed. She was already a star in Atlanta. And the fact that Coco was murdered is truly a commentary on the lives of Black trans women in this country and the epidemic of violence visited upon them. So incredibly emotional and tough watch, knowing what we know now, but an important one because it captured who she was and she got to tell her story and it introduced her to the world. But all of the stories in that film are important and definitely one that you want to catch. So if you are not a big reader, or even if you are, or just love documentaries like I do, that's a great start. That is a great list to start to just bone up on your LGBTQ education and knowledge. If you're part of the community, it's so important to see yourself in film. If you are not and you want to learn more and get better educated, it's a great place to start. Lastly, this isn't a documentary, it is a film, but I would highly recommend Rustin. It came out on Netflix last year, and it is story about Rustin's life. He was one of the closest advisors to Martin Luther King, and he was a quintessential part of the LGBTQ rights, but also civil rights movement. But his voice was mostly silent and kept in the background because he was an openly gay man. And anytime that I'm struggling with my own activism, I watch Rustin, and it reminds me why we still fight, and that even if your face isn't seen, even if they try to silence your voice, you can still change the world. It really gives you the essence of the story, but in a more cinematic way.